Well, hello, and welcome to the very first episode of Arch Premises. It's hard to say that it's plural with an S because I'm talking about several different setups and payoffs and things like that. But I also wanted to make sure the name wasn't taken, and I had a very hard time coming up with a name that wasn't copyrighted and wasn't already in use, or a name that wasn't already a podcast. But I think we got this one locked down. Now, my original name for the podcast, which I thought was brilliant when I thought of it, was Arch Madness, being Mike Archer just rambling on about stuff and things that bother him. But that's actually taken by, there's that Arch in St. Louis, and there's some kind of tournament there. So, anyway, we have our title, so let's get started. The first episode, I just wanted to give a brief background of my relationship with comedy and how it came to be where comedy is such a ginormous part of my life. My earliest memories of comedy are listening to Weird Al Yankovic when I was really young and just trying to figure out how his creative, what his creative process was. How do you come up with these verses and songs and albums of just these hilarious parodies that over multiple listens you catch little things in them that also play on what the original song is. So I very early realized that the more creative it was, the more funny it was, and the more creativity that was required, I felt would make everything that much more appealing. Appealing, which is also like appalling, appealing to an audience. So Weird Al was a big part of that. I soon moved on to George Carlin, who has been gone for so long, but all his stuff still seems to resonate with a lot of people, whether it's politicians or religion or whatever topic he talks about. Everything seems so spot on. I actually got to see him in person in 2002, which is an honor that I got to see him, and I've seen a lot of comedians since then. And then in more of a darker and depressing time in my life, which was around 2016 and 17, I stumbled onto Bill Burr's Monday Morning Podcast, which is a twice a week podcast, which literally was like going to therapy twice a week just to hear him ramble about just the stupidest or most irreverent things and topics that don't go together. But just hearing him talk it was like turning my brain off for an hour from any anxiety or depression or anything that was really, troubling me at that time. So I really just always wanted to contribute that with my kind of comedy, talent, if we want to call it that, and give it to people. So when maybe they're struggling, they're going through a tough time, there's some lighthearted stuff I can say or talk about that really kind of pulls them in. So the biggest thing with stand-up comedy is, like, I know so many people that are really funny, like countless amounts of people in my family, people I've known for years. They're so funny, but the people I know that do stand-up comedy, it's like 1% of the people that that are funny, because hardly anyone does stand-up comedy that I know, that I haven't met because they were doing stand-up comedy. So the biggest thing, their biggest obstacle is always, well, I can't really talk in front of a crowd of strangers and try to be really funny, but I don't have an issue with that. Without getting too deep into detail, I had some experiences in front of crowds when I was in high school where a lot of times it was awkward, a lot of times it was unpleasant, but you just get kind of forced into the fire where you're speaking in front of a lot of people. So talking in front of people that are going to laugh at jokes I tell, and the worst thing they're going to do is just not laugh, didn't seem like any kind of obstacle for me. The biggest obstacle was to write comedic stuff that people who don't know you would laugh at. Because when you have close friends and people that you see every day, you kind of have your line of jokes, or your jokes about relatives, or jokes about friends or coworkers, or things you don't like about your job, which is just easy to joke about or make memes about or, tell stories about. But when it's people that you don't know, you have to find some kind of common ground and figure, okay, well, everyone kind of knows about this, so let's see, where that goes. And it really comes down to a lot of writing. My mom's a very, very good writer, so I've had to kind of pick that up where if you're going to do 5 minutes of comedy, it's like, oh, it's 5 minutes. It's not too hard to do that. It's very hard to do that. 5 minutes of comedy is, I don't know if it's 500 words or how long it actually is and plays out to, but it's a lot, and you rehearse it so much before you do the stand. I mean, at least I did. Rehearse it so much that after a while, the words kind of lose their meaning, and you feel like everything you're talking about isn't funny at all. It's like when you hear a joke for the 30th time and it's not funny at all, or if you've seen a funny movie 50 times, like you know it's coming, it's not really that exciting. But you have to remind yourself this is the first time that they're ever hearing this and to sell it like it's hilarious. It's also in the writing where you want your first joke to hit and your last joke to hit, and you want to try to tie it together. There really is a skill and it's the approach of you have to make everything kind of work together. Like you start at A, you circle through B, C, and D, and then you end back at A because it ties back in to the entire topic. That was tough. My first ever stand up, I was cripplingly terrified to do it. And I used to work in banking for 15 years, which was largely miserable. And my bit was just about how it's easier to take money out of your 401k and pay the penalties than to ask a relative or friend for money because of the guilt trip and the general annoyance you'll be to them before you completely pay them back. Not really a mainstream topic. The basic gist was guilt versus withdrawal fees from a retirement account. But everybody's gonna have their first set, and I think I did maybe 2.5 minutes on that. And then as soon as I finished, the some guy in the audience yelled out, "Well, don't stop now!" And I'm like, I cannot wait to get off stage because that was terrifying. My second, third set, fourth set, you really start to get your feet wet and kind of figure out what works and what doesn't work. The funny thing is, I would always upload them onto YouTube, which you can look up Mike Archer, and you'll find some other Mike Archer stuff that's not me. But Mike Archer's stand up should lead you there. There's maybe 4 or 5 videos. Mike Archer with the number 2 next to it is probably my best one. Um, there was the funny thing is you send these videos to people just to let them know because obviously not everybody can come to a bar or an open mic to see you. And if people really like the comedy, they'll mention a line or something you mentioned in there that was really funny. And if people hate it, they're not going to say they hate it or it's not funny or it's, a stupid thing to do. They'll always say, "Wow, you're really brave to go up there." It's just such a backhanded compliment, at least to me, because it's just like, well, yeah, did any of the things I say resonate with you whatsoever? Anything, come up that, rings true in your life? But, they'll just kind of say that, It's like if you fail a test and like, well, I'm sure you tried your best, which means, well, you suck. So those are the two reactions I always got when I would send out my comedy to people. The worst that I had was I was at Keegan Ailes for a regular open mic. I did 2 sets of Keegan Ailes. One was really good. One just fell completely flat. Um, and there's nothing worse than you have a whole bit planned out, and the first 2 bullet points for laughs are just, you get nothing. People are just kind of staring at you. So you have to you have to kind of scrap that while you're on stage and go back into something that you think is going to work. And it's like a cut and paste trial and error thing, but it's extremely uncomfortable. And then after I got off stage, every comic I watched after that, I was like, wow, these guys are really good. Why am I so terrible at comedy? It's just it's awkward, but you get over it. But the biggest thing about crowd reactions is your content isn't always going to get huge laughs or just crickets. The biggest thing that affects your stand-up act is your audience, because I did a set once at Tony's Pizzeria, and it was an open mic, but it wasn't an open mic where, 5 people read poetry, 2 people have a band, they do cover band stuff, and then 3 people do comedy. This was just comedians. So the whole crowd is comedians or friends of comedians. And I could have done that probably same bit I did that got no reaction there and got a huge laugh. I got so many laughs at Tony's Pizzeria because the crowd was so engaged. I even told them to calm down a few times so I could get to the next bit. So, and people don't realize that your crowd really dictates, what reaction you get. And if they're really into it, it's great. And if they really don't care, you could be doing A+ material and it gets, an F reaction. But you have to study a lot to get to how to work the joke into a story and what to play on and what to play off of. But it's a lot of fun. It's a huge adrenaline rush to do it, and that's why I haven't done it since COVID, but I have thought about doing it, which kind of brings me to the purpose of the podcast in general. Each episode, I want to do a bit that I've thought of that I haven't done on stage. I may do a few that I have done on stage just to introduce them to some people who haven't heard of them. But I will spend so many days like just randomly sitting around thinking about funny stories or funny, jokes and stuff. And I'm like, I should really develop that into a bit. Well, instead of having to get stage time and an open mic and try to get an audience and put it on YouTube and do all that, I'm just going to streamline it, and each new bit will just be a new episode. So I'll try to do one, at least a few every month, just to keep people engaged. But I do have a few in mind I've thought of, and I'm can't wait to record those and put those up and just see what the reaction is. So I hope you find this interesting. It's a very rewarding yet scary hobby to have, to be a stand-up comic. But the people you meet that also do the comedy are just some of the funniest people in the world. And I hope to see you in episode 2, and I'm grateful that you tuned in. I'll talk to you then. Have fun.